Filter Podcast coming to you here. Today? It's January 11th, 2022. Just want to get in a quick one here today. I want to talk about real quick the now we're closing on the first weekend of the NFL playoffs. You know, you still want to put to bed some of the teams that are that have that big playoffs, unfortunately. And there are 5 teams I'm looking at right now that didn't make the playoffs that I have my eye on in 2023. Now, that doesn't mean that these teams I'm looking at are necessarily going to make the playoffs, but these are teams that can be on the way up, teams that I believe can crack the playoff spot, or hell, who knows? Maybe they're this team a big move away from making the Super Bowl. Who knows? But these are the 5 teams that have me intrigued going to 2023. The first team here on my list, of course, this is not going to surprise anybody, the Detroit Lions. The Lions are, look, who would have thought that was a week 4, week 5 when they played against the Seahawks, that loss? Now, granted, they were banged the hell up, that 48-45 loss. Who would have thought that game would have decided, the tiebreaker between those two teams to get into the 7th wildcard spot in the NFC? Obviously, we can say the Carolina lost 3 weeks ago, also didn't help the Detroit Lions. But the Detroit Lions, though, in most stretches this year, looked like a competent team. I said before the year started that they would be I always say, a frisky team, if you will. That to look out for, not necessarily a playoff team, but in the mix, and they were clearly in the mix. And if they have if one thing goes their way extra, they're in the playoffs this year. I think Dan Campbell's the right guy for the right time for that team. I think Jared Goff, has in a lot of ways changed the narrative, about himself. Leaving since getting traded from the Rams, I think he's a solid quarterback. They have good talent there, and I expect this team to respond and to. Especially in the division that, yes, the Vikings won it, but they also won a division with a -5 point differential this year. The Packers are in complete limbo now. Does Aaron Rodgers retire? Who knows? The Bears are still rebuilding. So there's a door open for the Lions to make some noise. Now, look, I'm not sitting there saying they're going to win the division next year. I'm not even predicting that. But I'm just saying there's an opportunity here for the Lions to capitalize on the success this year, despite missing the playoffs. The second team here on my list is the New York Jets. This team is, in my opinion, a competent quarterback away from being a real playoff team. This team was in the mix most of the year. They were actually bound for a playoff spot up until week 17. Obviously, they got a decision to make with Zach Wilson. What to do with that? I think it's clear that even though Mike White was good in stretches, he's not the long-term solution. So I expect this team to be in the mix for another quarterback, possibly in the next in this coming offseason here. But that being said, other than Buffalo and, of course, Miami, but with this situation with Tua, who knows what happens with that? The Jets have an opportunity also here to make some noise, like the Lions, in that division and maybe crack a playoff wildcard spot if they get the quarterback right. Who knows? They go after Derek Carr, they go after someone, but they have an opportunity here to make some noise as well. Third team on my list here, Denver Broncos. Now, I know what you're saying, disastrous year, Russell Wilson, bad trade, all that. Well, they did the right thing in firing Nathaniel Hackett, the coach. He was horrible. You knew that from week 1. We knew that was a dumpster fire. But here's what the Broncos do have. They do have an elite defense. They do have playmakers. They do have a quarterback that before this year was actually an elite quarterback. I am not convinced that Russell Wilson is done as a high quality, above average quarterback in this league. Now, if I see another performance like this year, going to next year, then we can say that Russell Wilson definitely is done. He's damaged goods. We can say that. But I'm not convinced that this one bad year closes the door. And for the record, he did play pretty well toward the end of the year once the Hackett firing happened. Now, we can say that, of course, that always happens with players. When you lose a coach, they tend to trend up and all that. And that makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I do think, this is a team not to give up on this yet. And they have pieces there. They got an owner who spent a lot of money, the new owner. And look, if they can get Sean Payton to coach their team, obviously it's going to cost them probably a first-round pick or something that nature, some compensation. But if you can get Sean Payton there to ride the ship, if it happens, of course, that the door's open there for them too as well. So I still think the Broncos are a compelling team going to 2023 season. My fourth team on my list here is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think people really appreciate Mike Tomlin and what he's done in the 15 years he's been there. I think people say they see that stat that 15 years in a row with no team under 500 and think that's some easy thing to do. And you're a Steeler fan, you think, well, that's what you should do because you're with the Steelers. But yet no coach can claim that to have that kind of success this long. And I'll be honest with you, he hurt himself, in my opinion, by not starting Kenny Pickett before the year started. Starting Mitchell Trubisky was not the move. I thought Pickett should be a start from week 1. But we're here, and this team recovered. And again, this team was literally a Miami loss from making the playoffs this year. If Miami lose that game to the Jets, which they almost did, it was nip and tuck to the end in an ugly game. This team, once again, like last year, backs into the playoffs because they had beaten Cleveland also the same day, the same time, okay, in the same fashion they did last year. So you got to give that team credit. Kenny Pickett, solid quarterback. He's going to be the guy, at least for the foreseeable future right now. It's clear that he's the guy. Elite defense. They got some draft capital now to play with. So I think the Steelers are a team to watch. And I think, looking at the AFC as a whole, I mean, I would write them off after what we saw this year. And then, also they didn't have TJ Watt for half the year due to the injury from week 2, week 1. I think, the Steelers are another team to watch out for as well, too, next year. I'm not saying they're a playoff team, but they were so damn close this year as it was anyway, so anything's possible. And finally, my fifth team on my list here, Chicago Bears. And look, I'm not saying that the Bears are going to be a wild card contender next year. I don't expect them to at all. I do not expect that whatsoever. But what I will say is that when you're a team with a lot of options, this team right now is projected to have the most cap space in the league. The number is reportedly $118 million in cap room to play with. And the number 1 draft pick, thank you, Lovie Smith. It stands to reason that at the very least, having options is a good thing. And Ryan Pace is gone. They got a new regime there in Chicago. So let's give them a chance to turn things around. I know a lot of Bears fans are looking at the history of this team, and every time they have opportunity to make moves and to make a splash and turn things around, it falls on its head. But we can't. Again, we can't compare every regime to the other. Maybe this regime is different. Who knows? But I do know a team with a lot of options is very dangerous. And I think the Chicago Bears, at least in terms of what they're going to do this spring, in terms of the free agency, in terms of the draft, because obviously they have the quarterback. Justin Fields is the quarterback going forward. Get him some weapons. Maybe you go after a trade. Maybe you trade for, I don't know, Cooper Kupp or DeAndre Hopkins, a team that on teams that are falling apart now. Who knows? The point is, there's options for this team. And when you're a bad team, but also have draft capital also as well, at least have draft capital as well as cap room to spend, you're in a good spot. You're in a good spot. So those are the 5 teams right now I believe are worth looking at. I believe the teams to watch out for in 2023. All right. Again, each Christian 7 on Twitter, and we'll talk to you next time on the Unfiltered Podcast.